Hi, I'm Francesca, and this is the second episode of my walking tour in Nanjing. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the Nanjing Decade, when the city was capital from 1927 until 1937, and I'm going to tell you about the capital city plan. The tallest building in Nanjing, and when it was built in 2010 it was the 8th tallest building in Asia. A building or a city's architecture can play a really important role in the identity of a city. So in 1927, when they were building the capital from scratch, this was going to be one of their biggest concerns. In 1927, Nanjing was not in good shape at all. Although it did have modern schools and hospitals, there was a lack of modern plumbing system, and so the water available to residents was either contaminated or very bad tasting. So people went to local tea shops to buy Kai-shek or boiled water in the hope that that might be a little bit better for them. Much was to be done to make Nanjing into this exemplar of modern China that Sun Yat-sen had so wished. So the government set up a competition to design the city. Imagine, you have to design a city that represents the new China, that instills in people a sense of patriotism, but also uses some Western scientific methods, and all at the same time creating some kind of link to Nanjing's history. So 9 firms took part in the competition. Some chose to use traditional architecture with steel and cement to give their structures a modern feel. Others chose to imitate aspects of Western city plans with diagonal roads that allowed for traffic circulation and air circulation. But none of the designs managed to keep within the 6 million budget, with this one costing 20 million, and that was for the first stage of construction only. In fact, no one won the competition, and they only awarded 2 third places. But despite the failure of this competition, on the 31st of December 1929, the government published the Capital City Plan. So let's go and see some of the results of this plan. At the heart of the capital city plan was the building of Junction Road, named of course after the founding father of modern China, Dr. Sun Yat-sen. When planners were designing the city, they wanted to create emotional ties to this familiar national hero, and so they built Junction Road. The road is 12 kilometers long and it remains a central axis in the city today. But the building of the road caused upheaval among locals, because it required the tearing down of 95,000 meters squared of housing, and people were moved out of their home with little or no compensation. It was said at the time that while some didn't know who was the leader of China, even a 3-year-old knew of the tearing down of buildings to build this road. But there was a strong practical need for the road too, and at the time, in 1929, it was built 40 meters wide, with a central lane for fast cars, outer lane for slow cars, and then a bit on the outside for pedestrians. Symbolically, the road was also very important, and initially it was known as Yingchen Dadao, meaning to welcome the coffin road, because the late Sun Yat-sen's body was to be brought to Nanjing and taken on a procession through the road and then buried on Purple Mountain. The Nanjing Decade, lots of important government buildings were constructed along Zhongshan Avenue. City planners wanted the architecture to combine the best of East and West, to show on the one hand a continuity with history, and on the other hand a sense of modernity. And this building behind us is an excellent example. It used to be the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So when you look at this building, there's certain aspects that are particularly Chinese, such as the cloud pattern that's used throughout the building. And another thing is the use of brackets. And traditionally, brackets were used to support the roof of traditional architecture. And it was said that the roof of a building represented heaven and the platform represented earth, making beams and brackets a link between the two. But here they've lost that practical function, although they've still maintained some of that kind of cultural significance, placing the government in the centre of heaven and earth. Some things about the building are particularly Western, for example the use of bricks and the flat roof. And windows too were not seen in traditional Chinese architecture in order to separate government structures from the outside. So here the windows can be seen as a different kind of relationship between inside the government and outside the governed. In actual fact, the city plan was always changing, and this residential district behind us was one of the only parts to be completed as planned, including this district bureau behind us. So the wealthy class lived in these detached villas, and throughout the Nanjing Decade, over 2,000 of them were built, which is quite impressive. That's the equivalent of one building every 2 days for 10 years. One of the previous mayors of Nanjing suggested that they started to pull down the Ming Dynasty city walls and use the bricks as building materials, but his suggestion was rejected, although Kai-shek himself thought this was quite a good idea, and he instructed people quietly to start taking down the city walls to use the bricks as building material. When the public found out, there was outrage, and fortunately they saved the walls from being destroyed. After all, they were such an integral part to the capital city plan. Towards the end of the Nanjing Decade, due to insufficient funds, the nationalist headquarters had still not been built, and it was clear that the capital city, although very ambitious, had been built with many limitations and in quite a disorderly fashion. It showed a government that was not entirely in touch with the needs of its people. But the achievements that they made in this 10-year period of the Nanjing Decade were still quite remarkable. And in a 1936 National Geographic article, they described Nanjing's transformation from a straggling, overgrown village into China's most progressive metropolis. Its population had increased from 100,000 to over 1 million people.